Samuel 26. And the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah, saying, Behold, David is hidden on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite the wilderness. And Saul rose up, and he descended into the desert of Ziph, and with him 3,000 elect men of Israel, so that he might seek David in the desert of Ziph. And Saul encamped at Gibeah on Hachilah, which was opposite the wilderness on the way. But David was living in the desert. Then, seeing that Saul had arrived after him in the wilderness, he sent explorers, and he learned that he certainly had arrived in that place. And David rose up secretly, and he went to the place where Saul was. And when he had seen the place where Saul was sleeping, and Abner, the son of Ner, the leader of his military, and Saul sleeping in a tent, and the remainder of the common people all around him, David spoke to Ahimelech, the Hittite, and to Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, the brother of Joab, saying, Who will descend with me to Saul in the camp? And Abishai said, I will descend with you. Therefore, David and Abishai went to the people by night, and they found Saul lying down and sleeping in the tent, with his spear fixed in the ground at his head. And Abner and the people were sleeping all around him. And Abishai said to David, God has enclosed your enemy this day in your hands. Now therefore, I will pierce him with my lance, through to the ground, once, and there will not need to be a second. And David said to Abishai, You shall not kill him. For who may extend his hand against the Christ of the Lord, and yet be innocent? And David said, As the Lord lives, unless the Lord himself will strike him, or unless his day to die will have arrived, or unless, descending into battle, he will perish. May the Lord be gracious to me, so that I may not extend my hand against the Christ of the Lord. Now therefore, take the spear that is at his head, and the cup of water, and let us go. And so, David took the spear, and the cup of water that was at Saul's head, and they went away. And there was no one who saw it, or realized it, or awakened, but they were all sleeping. For a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen over them. And when David had crossed over to the opposite side, and had stood upon the top of the hill far away, so that there was a great interval between them, David cried out to the people, and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, Will you not respond, Abner? And responding, Abner said, Who are you, that you would cry out and disquiet the king? And David said to Abner, Are you not a man? And who else is like you in Israel? Then why have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people entered, so that he might kill the king, your lord. This is not good, what you have done. As the Lord lives, you are sons of death, because you have not guarded your Lord, the Christ of the Lord. Now therefore, where is the king's spear, and where is the cup of water that was at his head? Then Saul recognized the voice of David, and he said, Is this not your voice, my son David? And David said, It is my voice, my lord the king. And he said, For what reason has my lord pursued his servant? What have I done? Or what evil is there in my hand? Now therefore, listen, I beg you, my lord the king, to the words of your servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him make the sacrifice fragrant. But if the sons of men have done so, they are accursed in the sight of the Lord, who has cast me out this day, so that I would not live within the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go, serve strange gods. And now, let not my blood be poured out upon the earth before the Lord. For the king of Israel has gone out, so that he might seek a flea, just as the partridge is pursued amid the mountains. And Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David. For I will never again do evil to you, because my life has been precious in your eyes this day. For it is apparent that I have acted senselessly, and have been ignorant of very many things. And responding, David said, Behold, the king's spear. Let one of the servants of the king cross over and take it. And the Lord will repay each one according to his justice and faith. For the Lord has delivered you this day into my hand, but I was not willing to extend my hand against the Christ of the Lord. And just as your soul has been magnified this day in my eyes, so let my soul be magnified in the eyes of the Lord, and may he free me from all distress." Then Saul said to David, "You are blessed, my son David. And whatever you may do, it shall certainly succeed." And David departed on his way. And Saul returned to his place. Samuel 27. And David said in his heart, "At some time, I will one day fall into the hands of Saul. Is it not better if I flee, and be saved in the land of the Philistines, so that Saul may despair and cease to seek me in all the parts of Israel? Therefore, I will flee away from his hands." And David rose up and went away, he and the 600 men who were with him, to Achish, the son of Maoch, the king of Gath. And David lived with Achish at Gath, he and his men, each man with his household, and David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam, the Jezreelite, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal of Carmel. And it was reported to Saul that David had fled to Gath. And so, he did not continue to seek him. And David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be given to me in one of the cities of this region, so that I may live there. For why should your servant stay in the city of the king with you?" And so, Achish gave Ziklag to him on that day. And for this reason, Ziklag belongs to the kings of Judah, even to this day. Now the number of days that David lived in the region of the Philistines was 4 months. And David and his men went up and took plunder from Jeshurun, and from Jersey, and from the Amalekites. For in the land long ago, these were the inhabitants of the area, going from Shur as far as the land of Egypt. And David struck the entire land. Neither did he leave alive man or woman. And he took away the sheep, and the oxen, and the donkeys, and the camels, and the garments. And he returned and went to Achish. Then Achish said to him, "Whom did you go out against today?" And David responded, "Against the south of Judah, and against the south of Jerahmeel, and against the south of Keni." Neither man nor woman was left alive by David. Neither did he lead back any of them to Gath, saying, "Lest perhaps they may speak against us." David did these things. And this was his decision during all the days that he lived in the region of the Philistines. Therefore, Achish trusted David, saying, "He has worked much harm against his people Israel. And so, he will be a servant to me forever." Samuel 28. Now it happened that, in those days, the Philistines gathered together their troops, so that they might be prepared for war against Israel. And Achish said to David, "I know now, certainly, that you will go out with me to war, you and your men." And David said to Achish, "You know now what your servant will do." And Achish said to David, "And so, I will appoint you to guard my head for all days." Now Samuel was dead, and all of Israel mourned for him, and they buried him in Ramah, his city. And Saul took away the Magi and soothsayers from the land. And the Philistines gathered together, and they arrived and made camp at Shunem. Then Saul also gathered all of Israel, and he arrived at Gilboa. And Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, and he was afraid, and his heart was exceedingly terrified. And he consulted the Lord. But he did not respond to him, neither by dreams, nor by priests, nor by prophets. And Saul said to his servants, "Seek for me a woman having a divining spirit, and I will go to her, and consult through her." And the servant said to him, "There is a woman having a divining spirit at Endor." Therefore, he changed his usual appearance, and he put on other clothes. And he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said to her, "Divine for me, by your divining spirit, and raise up for me whomever I will tell you." And the woman said to him, "Behold, you know how much Saul has done, and how he has wiped away the Magi and soothsayers from the land. Why then do you set a trap for my life, so that it will be put to death?" And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, "As the Lord lives, nothing evil will befall you because of this matter." And the woman said to him, "Whom shall I raise up for you?" And he said, "Raise up for me Samuel." And when the woman had seen Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and she said to Saul, "Why have you afflicted me? For you are Saul." And the king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What have you seen?" And the woman said to Saul, "I saw God ascending from the earth." And he said to her, "What appearance does he have?" And she said, "An old man ascends, and he is clothed in a cloak." And Saul understood that it was Samuel. And he bowed himself upon his face on the ground, and he reverenced. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disquieted me, so that I would be raised up?" And Saul said, "I am greatly distressed. For the Philistines fight against me, and God has withdrawn from me, and he is not willing to heed me, neither by the hand of prophets, nor by dreams. Therefore, I have summoned you, so that you would reveal to me what I should do." And Samuel said, "Why do you question me, though the Lord has withdrawn from you, and has crossed over to your rival? For the Lord will do to you just as he spoke by my hand. And he will tear your kingdom from your hand. And he will give it to your neighbor David. For you did not obey the voice of the Lord, and you did not carry out the wrath of his fury upon Amalek. For this reason, the Lord has done to you what you are enduring this day. And the Lord also will give Israel into the hands of the Philistines, along with you. Then tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. But the Lord will also deliver the camp of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." And immediately, Saul fell stretched out on the ground. For he was terrified by the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him. For he had not eaten bread all that day. And so, the woman entered to Saul, and she said to him, "Behold, your handmaid has obeyed your voice, and I have placed my life in my hand. And I have heeded the words which you spoke to me. And so now, I ask you to heed the voice of your handmaid, and let me place before you a morsel of bread, so that, by eating, you may recover strength, and you may be able to undertake the journey." But he refused, and he said, "I will not eat." But his servants and the woman urged him, and after some time, heeding their voice, he rose up from the ground, and he sat upon a bed. Now the woman had a fatted calf in the house, and she hurried and killed it. And taking meal, she kneaded it, and she baked unleavened bread. And she set it before Saul and before his servants. And when they had eaten, they rose up, and they walked all through that night. Samuel 29. Then all the troops of the Philistines were gathered together at Aphek. But Israel also made camp, above the spring which is in Jezreel. And indeed, the princes of the Philistines advanced by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men were in the rear with Achish. And the leaders of the Philistines said to Achish, "What do these Hebrews intend to do?" And Achish said to the leaders of the Philistines, "Could you be ignorant about David, who is the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, and who has been with me for many days, even years, and I have not found within him anything, from the day that he fled to me, even to this day?" Then the leaders of the Philistines became angry against him, and they said to him, "Let this man return, and let him settle in his place, which you appointed for him. But let him not descend with us to battle, lest he become an adversary to us when we begin to fight. For in what other way will he be able to please his Lord, except with our heads? Is not this the David, about whom they were singing, while dancing, saying, 'Saul struck down his thousands, but David his 10,000s?'" Therefore, Achish called David, and he said to him, "As the Lord lives, you are good and righteous in my sight, even in your departure and your return with me in the military camp. And I have not found anything evil in you, from the day that you came to me, even to this day. But you are not pleasing to the princes. Therefore, return, and go in peace, so that you do not offend the eyes of the princes of the Philistines." And David said to Achish, "But what have I done, or what have you found in me, your servant, from the day that I was in your sight to this day, so that I may not go out and fight against the enemies of my lord, the king?" And in response, Achish said to David, "I know that you are good in my sight, like an angel of God. But the leaders of the Philistines have said, 'He shall not go up with us to the battle.' And so, rise up in the morning, you and the servants of your Lord who came with you. And when you have risen up in the night, as it begins to be light, go forth." And so David rose up in the night, he and his men, so that they might set out in the morning. And they returned to the land of the Philistines. But the Philistines ascended to Jezreel. Samuel 30. And when David and his men had arrived at Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made an attack on the south side against Ziklag. And they had struck Ziklag, and burned it with fire. And they had led the women in it away as captives, from the small to the great. And they had not killed anyone, but they led them away with them. And then they traveled on their journey. Therefore, when David and his men had arrived at the city, and had found it burned with fire, and that their wives and their sons and daughters had been led away as captives, David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices. And they mourned until the tears in them failed. For indeed, the two wives of David also had been led away as captives, Ahinoam, the Jezreelite, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly saddened. And the people were willing to stone him, because the soul of every man was bitter over his sons and daughters. But David was strengthened by the Lord his God. And he said to the priest Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, "Bring the ephod to me." And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David consulted the Lord, saying, "Shall I pursue these robbers, and will I overtake them, or not?" And the Lord said to him, "Pursue. For without doubt, you will overtake them and find the prey." Therefore, David went away, he and the 600 men who were with him, and they arrived as far as the torrent Besser. And certain ones, being weary, stayed there. But David pursued, he and 400 men. For 200 stayed, who, being weary, were not able to cross the torrent Besser. And they found an Egyptian man in the field, and they led him to David. And they gave him bread, so that he might eat, and water, so that he might drink. And also a section of a mass of dried figs, and 2 clusters of dried grapes. And when he had eaten, his spirit returned, and he was refreshed. For he had not eaten bread, nor drank water, for 3 days and 3 nights. And so David said to him, "To whom do you belong? Or where are you from? And where are you going?" And he said, "I am a young man of Egypt, the servant of an Amalekite man. But my Lord abandoned me, because I began to be sick the day before yesterday. For indeed, we broke forth to the southern side of Cherith, and against Judah, and to the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire." And David said to him, "Are you able to lead me to this battle line?" And he said, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me, and that you will not deliver me into the hands of my Lord, and I will lead you to this battle line." And David swore to him. And when he had led him, behold, they were stretched out on the face of the land everywhere, eating and drinking and celebrating, as if it were a feast day, because of all the prey and spoils that they had taken from the land of the Philistines, and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from evening until the evening of the next day. And no one among them escaped, except 400 youths, who had climbed on camels and fled. Therefore, David rescued all that the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued his 2 wives. And nothing was missing, from small even to great, among the sons and daughters, and among the spoils, and among everything whatsoever that they had seized. David returned it all. And he took all the flocks and the herds, and he drove them before his face. And they said, "This is the prey of David." Then David arrived at the 200 men, who, being weary, had stayed, for they had not been able to follow David, and he had ordered them to remain at the torrent Besser. And they went out to meet David, and the people who were with him. Then David, drawing near to the people, greeted him peacefully. And all the wicked and iniquitous men, out of the men who had gone with David, responding, said, "Since they did not go with us, we will not give to them anything from the prey that we have rescued. But let his wife and children be enough for each of them. When they have accepted this, they may go back." But David said, "You shall not do this, my brothers, with these things that the Lord has delivered to us, for he has preserved us, and he has given into our hands the robbers who broke out among us. And so, let no one heed you over these words. But equal shall be the portion of him who descended to the battle, and of him who remained with the supplies, and they will divide it alike." And this has been done from that day and thereafter. And it was established as a statute, and as if a law, in Israel even to this day. Then David went to Ziklag, and he sent gifts from the prey to the elders of Judah, his neighbors, saying, "Receive a blessing from the prey of the enemies of the Lord." To those who were in Bethel, and who were in Ramoth toward the south, and who were in Jatir, and who were in Aroer, and who were in Siphmoth, and who were in Eshtemoa, and who were in Rakel, and who were in the cities of Jerahmeel, and who were in the cities of Keni, and who were in Hormah, and who were at the lake of Ashan, and who were in Athach, and who were in Hebron, and to the remainder who were in those places where David had stayed, he and his men. Samuel 31. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel. And the men of Israel fled before the face of the Philistines, and they fell down slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines rushed upon Saul, and upon his sons, and they struck down Jonathan, and Abinadab, and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. And the entire weight of the battle was turned against Saul. And the men who were archers pursued him. And he was severely wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and strike me, otherwise these uncircumcised may come and kill me, mocking me." And his armor-bearer was not willing, for he had been struck with an exceedingly great fear. And so, Saul took his own sword, and he fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer had seen this, namely, that Saul had died, he too fell upon his sword, and he died with him. Therefore, Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men, on the same day together. Then, seeing that the men of the Israelites had fled, and that Saul had died with his sons, the men of Israel who were across the valley or beyond the Jordan abandoned their cities, and they fled. And the Philistines went and lived there. Then, when the next day arrived, the Philistines came, so that they might despoil the slain. And they found Saul and his 3 sons lying on Mount Gilboa. And they cut off the head of Saul. And they despoiled him of the armor, and they sent it into the land of the Philistines all around, so that it might be announced in the temples of the idols and among their people. And they placed his armor in the temple of Ashtoreth. But his body they suspended on the wall of Bethshan. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead had heard all that the Philistines had done to Saul, all the most valiant men rose up, and they walked all night, and they took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. And they went to Jabesh Gilead, and they burned them there. And they took their bones, and they buried them in the forest of Jabesh. And they fasted for 7 days. Thank you for watching. If you like the content on this channel, please press subscribe, the like button or comment below. We'd love to get your tips. See you next time.